This is Math 2, Unit 11, Lesson 2, Solving by Completing the Square. Last week we learned how to complete the square, right? That was our Friday's lesson. We learned how to complete the square. Today we're going to use that concept to solve quadratic equations. I need you guys listening. That means you're not talking. Okay. Solve. And the method we're going to be using today is completing the square. That's all we're using. Number 1, x squared minus 10x plus 5 equals 0. Now, this is going to change just a little bit. What have I said in previous units? When there's double x's, what are we going to do? Factor, but pause. I want you not to factor. I want you to solve by what? Completing the square. And this one is not factorable anyway. Can you guys see that? There's nothing that multiplies to 5 that when I do inside outside would equal negative 10. Can you all see that? This is why we have this other method, because not everything is factorable. Does that make sense? Okay. So we do it just like we did on Friday's lesson, which was move over the constant. On last week's lesson, there was a y there, but now it's a 0, but we still treat it the same way. So what do I move over to the other side? Okay, that leaves behind, and again, same as last week, I move it over only because it's in the way. X squared minus 10x plus blank equals, now last week we wrote it y minus 5, but there's no y there anymore. What's 0 minus 5? Negative 5. And what I add to one side, I must add to the other. Does everybody see that? Okay, are we good? Now, do you guys remember what we did to fill in the blank? We take half of what? Negative 10. What's half of negative 10? Remember that for later, negative 5, and then we square it. What's negative 5 times negative 5? And what I add to one side, I must add to the other. Does that make sense? Okay, so then I double bubble this. You do not have to if you can do without it. What's negative 5 plus 25? 20. Okay, and then I factor, and it was half. What was negative 10 divided by 2? What did that come out to be? Negative 5. Does that work? Is negative 5 times negative 5 positive 25? And when you do your inside and outside, does it equal negative 10? Okay. So as I stated last week, you can skip that double bubble if you can go straight to the quantity squared. Equals 20. And I'm going to stop here. Last week, to write it into vertex form, I moved the 20 back over. Do you guys remember that? We just reviewed it beginning of class. Is there a y over here anymore? No. Please stop the talking. I am trying to solve. If you remember last unit, remember we had Pablo's way, and I can't remember the girl's name. Was it Maria's way? And we talked about Pablo's way being easier. Do you remember what he did at this point? Square root. Do we know how to solve equations like this? Square root both sides. Why? Because the square root is the inverse operation of a squared. We've talked about that plenty of times. Why did I square root on last week's notes? No, because last week's notes, I'm going to put it up here really quick. We were trying to write it in vertex form. So right here, I just moved the constant back over. I did not square root both sides. But what does this equation have that the other one does not? What letter does it have? A y. This one does not have a y, so I'm going to square root both sides and see what happens. They undo. X minus 5 equals square root of 20 or plus or minus? Okay, now I want you to break the 20 down right now. Break the 20 down into its factors. Hello, Mrs. Torres. It's okay. What happened? 7.5. I think she's at the 7.5. Oh, Dad's the same. Check. 7.5 too. Love you too. All right. Guys, did you get 2, 2, and 5? Yes? So, we haven't had to do this before because all the numbers we had before were like square root of 7 or square root of 5 or square root of 15. But square root of 20 has pairs that come out. What comes out? The 2, and what stays in? All right. Now, I'm trying to solve for x. What's the last thing I'm going to do? Add what to both sides? Now, they're not like terms. So there's 2 ways you can write this. And I've had kids write it this way, plus or minus 2 root 5 and then plus 5, or positive 5 plus or minus 2 root 5, which is the way I like to write it because we're going to get to a point where we have to write it that way. So the constant plus or minus the 2 root 5, or the rational plus or minus the irrational. All right, did we solve it? How many solutions did we end up with? 2. Does that make sense? Now, it didn't say it anywhere here other than solve, but technically, what are we looking for if I put 0 in for y? Okay, I heard one person say it. Does anybody remember? We spent a whole last unit doing it. The x-intercepts. Do you guys agree we just found the x-intercepts? How many x-intercepts does this parabola have? 2. All right, number 2. X squared plus 6x plus 15 equals 0. Ladies, I do need you listening. All right. If we're trying to solve by completing the square, I'm going to do the same thing I did earlier and do what with that 15? Subtract it over. Why? Because it's in our way. Now, if that 0 was a y, I would write it as y minus 15, but these are like terms. What is 0 minus 15? Okay, and then I have x squared plus 6x plus blank. And what I add to one side, I must add to the other. Take the middle, cut it in half, and square. What's 6 cut in half? 3. And what's 3 times 3? And what I add to one side, I must add to the other. Factor. If you don't have to double bubble, you can skip that step. What's negative 15 plus 9? Negative 6. All right. What does this factor to? John, can you tell me what it factors to, this piece right here? Plus 3 and plus 3. Are any of you guys skipping the double bubble step and writing it straight as quantity squared? And that's good. Negative 6. Okay. Now, I'm not writing it in vertex form. I'm solving. If I'm solving, do I move the negative 6 over or leave it where it's at and square root both sides? Square root, they undo each other. And what problem have I run into? Can we square root a negative? Not yet, so this means no real solution. No real solution. On your worksheet, it asks you if you end up with a no real solution, don't write, I mean, this is true, but for your answer, write none. Why do you think we write none? What did we just talk about these answers represent? X-intercepts. So what does it mean if I can't solve an equation? It means I have how many x-intercepts? There are none. 0. No x-intercepts. Does that make sense? Is that a yes? Okay. Number 3. x squared plus 12x equals negative 20. Has the constant already been moved over, or do I still have to do that step? Is there a constant to be moved over, or is it already done? It's already done, right? All right, so I can go straight to putting my blanks in. X squared plus 12x plus blank equals negative 20 plus blank. Cut your middle number in half and then square it. And add that to both sides. And I don't know why I did that, sorry. All right, what do we add to both sides? What's 12 cut in half? 6, and then squared is 36. Good job. Okay. Quantity squared, or double bubble. What's negative 20 plus 36? 16. X and X, minus minus, or plus plus? Plus plus. And plus plus what? 6. Does everybody agree with him? Does that multiply to positive 36? And when you do inside outside, does it add up to positive 12? Yes? Multiply to 36, and inside outside is positive 12. Okay, quantity square. And what do I do next? Move the 16 over, or square root both sides? Square root both sides. All right, square roots and squareds undo each other, leaving behind x plus 6 equals, is 16 a perfect squared? So 4. And what do I do next? Subtract the 2. All right, somebody stopped me and I was waiting for that. What did I forget? Plus or minus. Please do not forget that. And I had a handful of you forget that on the test. All right, now what do I do? Subtract the 6. X equals negative 6 plus or minus 4. Now, is it okay to leave the answer like this? No, and I had not a lot, maybe 1 or 2 kids that did that on the test, even though I've warned you and I've warned you, and I did take off points. This one we leave like this because they're not like terms. But are these two numbers like terms? Yes. So you do negative 6 plus 4 and negative 6 minus 4. What is negative 6 plus 4? Negative 2. And what's negative 6 minus 4? You add the opposite. What is it? No parentheses. That's not an ordered pair. How many solutions do I have? So 2x intercepts, and this one is no x intercepts. Do you guys see that? Yes or no? All right. The last piece, we're going to sketch some graphs. So for me, this is not enough room. You may have room on your front page, but for me, that's not, and I know that already. So I'm going to move to the back. But again, if you have room there, please continue working. Number 4. Okay. Y equals x squared plus 8x plus 9. All right, don't do anything to it yet. Just write it down. Oh, how is this different? Instead of 0, what do I have? A y. I do need you guys listening. All right, there are a few things you're going to do. You're going to rewrite it in vertex form. You're going to find the vertex. These first 2 pieces right here are review from last week's lesson. Okay, so you're rewriting in vertex form, you're finding the vertex, and then we're going to find the x-intercept, which is what we just reviewed on the previous page, and then the y-intercept, which is review from last unit. Okay, and then after all that, we're going to graph. Okay, what is the first thing they asked me for? Vertex form. Now, Vertex form is what we did last week. What we did last week and what we did today is very similar. What do I move over first? The 9. Only this time, is it -9 or y minus 9? What am I left with, guys? Like today, just -9 or y minus 9? Y minus 9. Why? Y minus 9? Because it's not a 0. X squared plus 8x plus blank. Plus blank. What I add to one side, I must add to the other. Again, this is review from Friday's lesson. Cut the middle number in half. What's 8 cut in half? What's 4 times 4? To both sides. Can anybody calculate that? What's -9 plus 16? What is it? 7. Plus or minus? Plus equals double bubble. Has anybody double bubbled it already? What do you get? X plus 4, which we can write as x plus 4 quantity squared. Okay, now here's where a lot of kids mess up when they're taking the test. What do I do next? Square root both sides or move over the 7? Okay, what am I trying to do? Am I solving or writing it in vertex form? Now, if I was solving, then I would square root both sides. But if I'm writing it in vertex form, I want to get the y by itself. Do you guys understand the difference? Okay, x plus 4 squared minus 7. And that's vertex form. Y equals the quantity of x plus 4 squared minus 7. What's our vertex? -4 what? -7? Yeah? Okay. X-intercepts. How do I find x-intercepts? Change the y to 0. Now guys, I need everybody paying attention. I have two y equals. I have this y equals, the original one given, and the one we've done all the work for to write in vertex form. Are these two functions equivalent? Are they the same thing? If I were to graph this one in a graphing calculator and plug this one in a graphing calculator, would they come out the same? Yes. Which one would you rather use to solve? Plug 0 in for y and solve. Would you rather use the one on the left or the one on the right? This one over here? Anyone else? This one here? Anyone not sure? The right? Who's telling me the right? And why the right? Can you give me more? It's just easier? He is right, and here's why. I need everybody paying attention so you don't make this mistake on the test. X-intercept, we plug in 0 for y. So if I were to use the original, 0 equals x squared plus 8x plus 9, I would try to factor. Does it factor? No. The only other way to solve it is to complete the square, which means move the 9 over, cut in half and square it. Did I already do all that work? Yes or no? Yes. So use the one you already did all the work on and make life easier for yourself. Does that make sense? So when you have one in standard form and when you have one in vertex form, and they are exactly the same, use the vertex form. You've already done all the work to get it there, and solve. How do I solve this? Now that I'm solving, what do I do? Anyone? Well, we just add 7 to the other side, and then I do what? Square root, and what does that give me? Root 7 or plus or minus root 7? Plus or minus root 7 equals, undo each other, what does that leave me with? X plus 4. And what do I move over to the other side? leaving behind x equals, what is that, -4 plus or minus root 7. Now, if you left your answer like this on last unit's test, I would be okay with it. But what are we going to do with this work eventually? Graph. If you have to graph x-intercepts, you need them in decimal form. I'm going to repeat that. If you ever have to graph or sketch, if you're not graphing or sketching, leave it like that, you're good. If you are graphing and sketching, we're going to change these to decimal form. Does that make sense? Okay, -4 plus or minus, I told you guys to get calculators. Can you take the square root of 7 in your calculator? Square root of 7 in your calculator. Is it 2.6? 2.645, so can we say 2.6? Okay, so can anybody remind the class why we're doing decimals when we haven't done it before? Because we're going to what? Graph. All right, so break it up. -4 plus 2.6 and -4 minus 2.6. Can you plug those numbers in your calculator? What's -4 plus 2.6? Negative what? -1.4. Did anybody get that? Okay, and then add the opposite. What do you get there? Thank you. -6.6. Does everybody see that? Okay, so I want to write those as two separate ordered pairs. So -1.4 comma what? 0. Good job. And then -6.6 comma 0. Looking at the original function, can anybody tell me what the y-intercept is without doing any work? I had one person answer. Anyone else? What's the y-intercept here without doing any work? 9. 9, 0 or 0, 9? Okay. Now, do you guys agree to find the y-intercept, the original form was better? Yes or no? Because for your y-intercept, you make x equal to 0. Y equals 0 plus 9 is simply 9. And you really don't have to show all that work. All right, any questions? Now, I'm not going to do tick marks on here because when you're doing your work tonight, the graph they give you is like this with no tick marks on it. And some of the numbers are like -20 or -32. And those numbers I don't expect you to do tick marks for. I'm trying to just check the numbers really quick. Oh, I guess they're not that bad. So technically on this one we can. Are all my numbers small enough? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. And again, on your paper, you don't have to do tick marks as long as you roughly sketch. My vertex is -4, -7. Get that on your paper. -4, -7. Which way is it opening, up or down, according to it being positive? Up or down? Up. Do you agree this is my axis of symmetry? What are my x-intercepts? -1.4 and -6.6. So you're going to want to estimate your decimals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So -1.4 and then -6.6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And my y-intercept is 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you graph. Okay, mine looks a little V-ish. It should be more U-shape. But does it make sense on how to do all this? Yes? Questions?